Good afternoon, good evening, actually, as we head into the latter stages of Thursday, the 17th of September. It is time for another Front Runner Football podcast, as much has happened since my colleagues convened on Monday. And of course, the big news now is the fact that Gavin has officially been appointed as the head coach of Kaizer Chiefs. It's probably the worst kept secret, in terms of once Ernst Middendorf's contract was terminated, he pretty much shot to the top of the list as the man to be considered for the position. So we're going to dig into that and its ramifications and speak to William Coolcat Shongwe later in our podcast. But we start with another course, the players that they've inherited from Wits in this whole takeover. We've already spoken ad nauseum about how at times some of the best players were stripped essentially from that team and sold on, but there is the matter of those that remain. And to discuss that, we've got two gentlemen who will be joining us on the show as far as good minds, an agent in Paul Mitchell, and then we have a sporting lawyer in Mandla Tshabalala, and of course Velile Mnyandu is also on the line this evening with me. Gentlemen, after all of that, good evening. Thank you so much for joining me. Lots to discuss, but let's set the scene, Velile, as far as what's happening with TTM and of course the ramifications of their takeover of Wits.
Thank you. Thank you, Kamza. Good evening to Mr. Paul Mitchell of Siavuma Sports, and also to you, Bramildos Mandla Tshabalala of Tshabalala Attorneys. Look, it's something that we've always been talking about. Fortunately, we had this discussion here on this platform last week, and we were also fortunate to have someone like Shoaib Walters who was involved in a similar process. And not long ago, when Mpumalanga Black Aces was bought by Cape Town City, the issue of players who relocate and those who will not be willing to relocate. And he did also share how players like Zamuxolo Ngalo even handled a case like that. If you remember at that time, Zamuxolo Ngalo ended up remaining behind here in Gauteng and not going to Cape Town. And that's when he joined Highlands Park. And I think at the time, and we've had a lot of similar cases before, and I'm also not surprised because there are some players who are currently with Wits. Well, now that entity has been sold, whom I know that have already committed to other teams. So as to how they are going to untangle themselves. In terms of freeing themselves from this situation, it's very interesting because this is what Paul now is also coming up with in terms of something like this. But in the footballing space, especially in the journalism space, I wouldn't say this is something new in terms of how we've seen it happening in the past. But I think it's important that we hear from people who are very much involved in it, from Paul as the agent, and also from someone like Mandla, who was very much part of these things as a sports lawyer, who's also been to FIFA cases and also at Court of Arbitration for Sport as well. So it's very interesting. But then again, I saw something really for a youngster in his first season asking for 2M. I think that's a bit far-fetched. But look, and I think we should clarify from the onset that we did invite TTM to be part of this process. And unfortunately, they opted not to come because they are saying they're still busy with these matters. So that's the reason why they are not here.
We obviously have to reach out to all the parties involved when dealing with a matter like this. And at this point, Paul, I mean, I'd like to speak to you about, the players that you represent that are affected by this whole situation? And in terms of what was your overwhelming feeling the moment you found out that this deal was going to happen? Do you remember what you thought as an agent of the players that you represented?
Yeah, look, I'm sure you'll appreciate it, and thank you for having me on tonight. Really appreciate it, and good evening to the listeners and good evening to the other guests. I think I don't want to speak specifically about individual players because obviously what's happening at the moment is going to be a legal case, to be quite honest. But just to answer your question broadly, it was very disappointing. I think it wasn't just disappointing to the players and to the staff and to the management and to the fans. It was disappointing to the whole of the South African football fraternity when we knew about Bidvest and we knew that it was going to be sold. It's an institution 9,900 years old. So from that point, it was very disappointing. But at the end of the day, Bidvest made a decision. And everybody has to respect that decision. What then truly happened is obviously, players naturally become worried. So whether it's a senior player who might have 2 years left on very good money, whether it's a junior player, who might be in the first team, whether it's a junior player who's in the MDC but was just on the verge of a first team call up, different people were worried for different reasons. So, basically then what happened is reassurances were given by Bidvest Wits, by the chairman and by let's just say the board. The chairman spoke to them and said, look, we are selling the club. We know that you're going to be disappointed, but rest assured everything's going to be done correctly. Those who do not want to relocate with the new club, because obviously there's going to be a new club. It's going to be relocating 600 kilometres far away. We understand that it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. There's going to be some players that the new team's not going to be able to afford. But what will rest assured, people who want to go to the vendor will be protected by the contract, so they'll be taken to the vendor because they contractually can. But those who don't want to go under, obviously, the labour law, they don't have to relocate. And obviously, by relocating, there's actually a fundamental change to the contract that two parties have entered into, and that party being the player of Bidvest Wits and the club Bidvest Wits. So for anything to change on that contract, there has to be a mutual agreement, and mutual people have to sign to say, yes, we're changing this contract now, and we agree to that. That's contracts. That's what happens. So meetings were held. It did get a little bit to a point at one stage where players were really not happy and were not going to go into the bio bubble. But then they had another meeting. I think TTM came to the meeting as well. And assurances were made. So that was it. So you're going to have some players. I mean, I'm not speaking for all the players here, of course, because I don't represent all the players, but naturally in anything, and we've got precedents in this, haven't we, with Cape Town City, for example. It's happening again now with Highlands Park. So with Cape Town City, as Shaib Walters was saying, which was clearly correct, and as John Committis would tell you, it was a similar process. We'd like you to come to Cape Town. Do you want to come? Yes, I do. Okay, we're going to take you across. Are we making any contractual changes? No, we're not. Everybody moves on. Player B, do you want to come to Cape Town? No, I don't. Okay,
right.
We're prepared to give you a clearance, a mutual termination of your contract. He moves on, and then there might be another player that they say, we don't want you. You're not going to be part of the new coach's plans. However, we'd like to sit down with you and discuss what we're going to do about your contract. That's the three ways. So there was a point with Bidvest Wits where the players weren't happy. That got sorted, and then ultimately what's happened, or what's happening, broadly speaking, is that there seems to be, in my opinion, a opportunity of cherry picking scenarios of players. So whether it's player A, who's, you know, is going to go, or whether it's player B that doesn't want to go, there seems to be some cherry picking. And all I can tell you, because like I said earlier, it's going to be a legal thing, but all I can tell you is, having spoken to various stakeholders, various players, various agents, I think out of 6 or 7, 8 players that I've spoken to, or I've spoken to the representatives, there's seven or 8 different scenarios in terms of, you know, one player left and was told he could go there for free, but if he stays local, it's a massive amount of money. But then if he goes there for free, and then something happens in relation to his new club, they will have to pay money at a later stage. I've seen one, I will call it mutual termination, where it says, well, we'll mutually terminate because you don't want to come with us, but you're not allowed to sign. You're not allowed to sign for a club in South Africa. If you do, it's a massive amount of money, and you're also not allowed to sign in the 2020 window. So in other words, we're terminating your contract, but we're not going to allow, which we mutually are doing, but we're not going to allow you to get further employment. So what it seems is that there seems to be a disparity on the following. And it's quite a simple thing. It seems to be that new owners of football clubs are coming into the PSL, are buying football clubs and relocating them, automatically thinking that they have every right on that contract and they can hold people to that contract, okay? And not only that, okay, they're then putting prices on the head to say, well, we've bought the club as a going concern, we can hold you to ransom. And it's not the case.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot right there to unpack. I think at this point, when you say there's so many legal ramifications of that scenario or the various scenarios, Bramindlos, in terms of the players here and their protections, obviously, you know, they have those contracts backing up their position. But, you know, in terms of the duty the new owners have to the current crop of players that are all looking to either stay with them or move on, what is that by law? And where do these players stand in terms of the law protecting them and being on their side?
I was away just for 2 minutes. I'm back now. Kamza, can you repeat your question again, please?
Okay, no, for sure. I was just saying, what duty do the new owners have to the players, the ones that come with the buying of the status of Bidvest and the club? What legally do they owe them? And if, I don't know how much of Paul's statement you heard, but you know, it sounds like the players are on a good footing here.
Maybe before I answer that question, maybe let me just give you a background as to how the NSL will approve a deal like this. The PSL is very strict on approving a deal like this, especially they look at the interest of the players. So one of the conditions and the requirement is that the contract of the players must be carried over to the new buyer. So, for example, you cannot say in a sale agreement that I'm bringing my own players, I'm discarding all these players from the previous club, and guaranteed PSL will not approve for that deal because the players are contracted. The money that comes from the league is actually for the players, for the salaries of the players. Secondly, when you buy a team, you're buying that as a going concern. Now, going concern simply means you also buy the contracts of not only the players, but everybody else, including staff. And now they become the assets of the new owners. And Paul is correct to say now that becomes a negotiation between the owner, the new owner, TTM in this case, and the players. But what is of importance is that if there was no agreement for termination prior to the relocation, and the club issues a letter and say, player A, you have to report for duty. As a player, you have to report for duty. And if the club is now based in Thohoyandou, for example,
Right.
now that's a new place of employment. You cannot want to negotiate your contract or the terms of your contract while you are in Joburg and you've received a letter to come to Thohoyandou. So I've always said this to players, and we have a case that we've dealt with a few years back, similar case. I've always said to players, travel to your new place of employment, then start negotiating with the club. Now that becomes a mutual, the player and the club can agree to mutually terminate the contract. But however, the club is, the new club is now obligated to continue with the contract. Remember, that was a prerequisite from the PSL, that the contract of the players must also be carried over, must continue.
Yes.
Now, a player cannot refuse now and say, no, I want to terminate my contract on the basis that the team is relocating to a new home. No, it has to be a mutual agreement between the two parties. The club cannot say, we're terminating your contract because now we are relocating to Thohoyandou. No,
Right.
it has to be a mutual agreement. So again, you look at the obligations of the employer, and in this case TTM. One of the most important one is you need to provide a place of work. Secondly, you need to remunerate the players. There's a big one that determines whether there is a employer-employee relationship, is a control test. Now, if you pass the control test, then the law will say there is a relationship, employer-employee relationship between the player and the club. Now, among the control tests is the club can tell you what to do tomorrow. If the club says to you, tomorrow you have to travel to Thohoyandou, that's an instruction, and that's a fair instruction. And then if you you report to work at Thohoyandou, that could be a misconduct, and one could argue and say that's a gross misconduct because you actually literally refused to go. And that becomes a ground for terminating your contract of employment with the club. So players need to be careful around that and say, look, my new employer is TTM, and TTM is now based in Venda, and I have not yet negotiated my termination or any termination of my contract. The best thing that you can do for yourself is to report for work in Venda at the place of work, after being instructed by the club. And when you get to Venda, you sit down with the club and say, Venda cannot work for me. Is it possible that we can agree that we mutually terminate the agreement? And if TTM says no, then you are obligated to stay there because they still have a contract. They own your contract.
Wow. Okay. That's blowing a lot of the perception out the water, because, you know, the narrative that we've heard for the longest time is that if the players don't want to relocate, they don't have to relocate. But it sounds like the law would be on the side of TTM in this instance, and that the players must speak to TTM am I characterizing that correctly?
Yeah, I can even support it with a case law. It's reported at PSL. A few years back there was a team called Roses United.
Yes.
It was based in Bloemfontein, and there was an exchange of ownership between Roses, and all of a sudden they relocated to Tembisa. But there was another relocation back to Bloemfontein. And then the owners of Roses said to the players, please report at Bloemfontein. And one of the players, it's Zimba, I can't remember his surname. Zimba said, I'm not coming to Bloemfontein because I've got family issues and my kids and all that. Then the matter went to JRC. The JRC said, the best thing that you could have done was for you to travel to Bloemfontein and report to work, and from there start negotiating with, because you don't know, when you get to Bloemfontein, you're worried about your family. You don't even know whether the club has made arrangement for your family. So you get to Bloemfontein and say, I don't like the town. And the players ended up losing the case. So it's important because you are more like a property of the club if there is a contract of employment. And then when there's a contract of employment, the laws favors the club more than anything else.
Okay, that's very interesting, Mr. Mitchell. Is that the way you see it? That those discussions happen in terms of players that want to move away from the club, but the club is well within their rights to invite them up north and start those discussions there? Or do you think that it should kind of start here where they found the players and end here for those players who want to remain or not go up to the north, let's say?
No, it's not. It's not my understanding. I'll be honest with you, it's not something to sort of get into the legal wrangles, you know, on the kind of this platform and Mr. Tshabalala's viewpoints there. Listening to it with great interest as always, but I don't necessarily agree with it. But I think it goes back.
Which part?
I don't necessarily. I don't agree with the fact that you can make a fundamental change to a contract of employment, and let's not speak about the specific case, but let's talk about Cape Town City going from Mpumalanga to Cape Town. You know, you've got a player at Mpumalanga or Black Aces at Mpumalanga. Okay, you are making a fundamental change to his contract of employment, okay, by asking him to relocate to another city. And yes, there needs to be agreements. If you can have, you know, mutual agreements, fine. That's normal. But where there's not, a player can't be forced to go to another location and take up that contract of employment under a new name, different district, completely different. I mean, you've got players with contracts that have got schooling in the contract, for example.
Right.
So you might have a young player at Roses United, and I'm going to use different clubs because I don't think it's fair to talk about Bidvest TTM. You might have a player at Roses United. He's 18 years old. Okay, as part of his contract, he gets schooling at this specific school of this specific standard. Okay, he can't be forced to then move to Port Elizabeth. Okay, his contract is fundamentally changing. You know, it's so I think there's various viewpoints. There's very illegal viewpoints. Not all the legal minds and all the legal viewpoints are the same. That's normal in any case law, okay? But it comes down to the fact that there's an agreement in place before the club goes over. That agreement hasn't been kept, number one. Number two, shouldn't it be, before the PSL signs off the sale, there's a list of the players. And in the list of the players, they go, there's the list A, there's the list B. List A are going with the new club, and they're all signed and sealed, and they've all signed, and they've all put the thumbs up. Here's list B are not going to go, and every single one of them has now been sorted out, and they've put the thumbs up. So that there's none of this going on. Because what I'd like to ask Mr. Tshabalala, okay,
go ahead,
is another question. So here comes another team that's been bought out, okay, and the change in the technical staff straight away, and openly have said, okay, to player A, hi there, you've got 2 years left on your contract, or they might not even say that. They just say to him, you're not part of the new coach's plans, right?
Yes.
You're not part of the new coach's plans, Mr. Tshabalala.
Yes.
You're not part of the coach's plans. Okay.
Yes.
Now this player A has got 2.5 years left on his contract to the value of 5 million rand. Okay.
Yes.
Now this new owner says this new coach doesn't want you. So the player said it's fine, no problem. I have to accept that. but I want my contract. I've got 2.5 years left. I want my
Yes.
5 million. Okay. Now, what's happening is, well, listen, we're going to give you 3 months. We're going to give you 6 months, right? I know what the answer is. I know you're going to give me the answer that I know. Okay, they have to pay him his contract.
Yeah.
However, the process, the hurt, the anguish, the devastation to that player, what we're going through in SA is not really correct, you know, and that's what I'm trying to say. And at the same time is, if you take another scenario where you've got 10 players, let's say, Mr. Tshabalala, and 10 players have all said they're not going to go, but there's 10 different, let's not say 10 different mutual terminations, but there's 10 different scenarios. So the club will say, well, with you, if you go there, it's 10 million rand. But if you go there and with you, you're not going anywhere. We want 50 million for you. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So there's big issues. Let's not kid ourselves. And as I said earlier, different legal minds have different legal opinions, and that's law. We know that.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, by moving a club far away from the original place of a club, where them contracts were in place, that is definitely a change within that contract of employment. So a relocation of, I'm Woolworths, Port Elizabeth, you're an employee, we're moving you to Cape Town. Do you want to relocate? No, sorry, relocate. All my family's in Port Elizabeth. I want to stay. Okay, we can offer you more. No, I'm sorry, I want to stay. I'd rather not go. Okay, we mutually terminate your contract and you're free to move on. Okay, because the terms and conditions of his contract are fundamentally changing. So,
yeah, no, okay. You both make very salient points, and Velile, I'll bring you in here just to maybe have the last word before we link up with Mr. Shongwe. In terms of, if you're reporting all of this and hearing these both sides of the story, what would be your conclusion as to how things?
I think before we get to the conclusion, I would like to know from Mr. Mitchell, how many of your players are affected by this situation? And who are supposed to be relocating?
Sorry, I just lost that last bit. You just broke up.
How many of your players are affected by this situation? Who are supposed to be relocating?
Well, are you talking about the because there's 2 sales? Don't forget. Yeah.
No. Bidvest Wits and TTM.
Okay. Well,
because at least the latest sale, they are still here in Joburg.
Oh, okay.
They're just playing in Bombay.
Okay, then, yeah. Okay, we've got one client who has made it clear to the previous employer, which was Bidvest Wits, okay, that he would move to the new club, okay, and we've got another client who can't and doesn't want to move all that way for various reasons to the new club. Okay. And then we had other players, mainly youngsters that were obviously on the periphery of the first team squad that, to be honest, have just come surplus to requirements. So in other words, haven't got maybe, let's just say, an option on his contract or whatever. So basically their contracts were just, they've just been surplus to requirements. They didn't have lengths left on the deal, on the current contract, so they left. But in terms of one who's made it clear he's going to go, and the other one who doesn't want to go and won't go. So that's it, yeah. And then I've seen and spoken to other people, representatives, but more so players. And whether it's the player that left the other day or 4 other players, every single scenario and what they've received is different. But there's one common thread that if you leave because you don't want to travel, then there's a bounty. It's like, and everybody's is different. It's like that one can go overseas for free, but this one can't.
Yeah, and so when you talk about the overseas one, because we saw earlier this week Lorenzo Godinho moving to Denmark, so meaning that he left for free.
I can't comment because he's not my client, so I think you'd have to talk to Mr. McCabe. But what my understanding is that he wouldn't have been allowed to move locally without a hefty fee, transfer fee. And I think he's left, and I think there may be some kind of agreement. I don't know. I can't comment because I don't know. But what I do know is that if it would have been a local club, then for sure it would have been a hefty thing. And that's also is the other issue is that, let's be honest, it's all right saying the new employer and going across, but they necessarily can't afford all this. They've made it clear they couldn't afford the players. That's why I talked about cherry picking.
For sure. And I mean, at that point, I also... Sorry, go ahead, Paul.
No, I'm saying it's easier for young kids on not even 100 grand a year. If a young kid's on 24 grand a year, don't be shocked, but don't laugh. If a young kid's on 24 grand a year, or another young kid's on 40 grand a year, okay.
40 grand a year.
Yeah.
40 grand a year.
Not a month.
Playing in the PSL.
What I'm saying to you is, I'm giving you examples to say, if it's what I'm trying to say, Velile, is that it's easy, isn't it? If you've got two young kids, one's on 40 grand a year, let's just say, and another kid's on 50 grand a year, the contract values, right? But here's another player who's on 4 million a year. Okay. It's easy, isn't it, to say, well, them two, yes, but that one, we got a problem. And this is what I'm trying to say is that you also have to have ethics at some stage with these transactions. It has to be ethical. It has to be ethical from Bidvest Wits to their employees. It has to be ethical from the new people. And the ethics around this were, guys, we're sorry we sold the club, but don't worry. Your money's going to be paid. If you want to go, it's fine. If you don't want to go, it's also fine. You'll be able to leave and you'll be able to find something else. That's what was given to the players. That's what's been done in previous cases. Cape Town City. John Committis did exactly that because that's what the labour law tells him he has to do. So, that's why I keep referring to cherry picking.
Okay. I mean, at that point, Mr. Tshabalala, what does that say about the test that's being applied to these prospective owners by the league? If essentially when you get the asset, you can then start stripping it and moving things on as and how you feel. I get it that, you accept it as a going concern. Does that give license to the club to draw up these various scenarios and shift the goalposts for all the different players?
Well, that's why we need people like Paul. We need agents. That's why they always play a critical role in the game, because that's why you start engaging with the club. Look, if one needs to be strict and apply labor law, we know that labor law it's a very integral part of sports because there's an issue of employment. However, there's always been this saying. I mean, there's case precedents as well that as much as you want to take football as an employment, but it's different in a sense that in most cases we have a short-term contract. You like go 2 years, 3 years. And CAS and FIFA, they've always said it's a very unique type of employment. It's not like any other employment. And that's why in most cases there's negotiations. The emphasis is talk to each other if you want to leave employment. It's like when you are full-time employed somewhere, you can just hand in a resignation letter and say, I want to leave. But in football, it's different. When you say, I want to leave, the club looks at you and say, yeah, but we've got a contract. I can claim specific performance from you. Because you must remember there's also the image rights that the club signed at the beginning of the season. And club can turn around and say, oh, with your image, I could have gained so much mileage. I could have marketed the club by just your image. So I've lost so much money. And a club will come and say, a buyer will say, I was interested in buying the club because of these type of players. Because if I have to market my club with these type of players, having as a club owning their image, I could have made so much money, and that's why I need to keep them. Now comes the element of labor law that comes in and says, what are your obligations? And I hear Paul talking about the fundamental change of the contract. Now we look at the fundamentals of an employment contract, and I've stated them earlier on, is that the employer must provide a place of work. Now, TTM will say, but we have provided a place of work. Now it's up to you as a player and say, but that place of work doesn't suit me. And the CAS has always said, the football players move around all the time. So it cannot be an excuse that I cannot move to a club that is now based in another province just because I'm not happy with the province. Now, it leaves the player with only one step to take, is to negotiate your exit. But again, you remember that they've bought the contract as they are. So they're not going to amend those contracts. Now, if there's a buyout clause in your contract and you want to leave, TTM will look at the buyout clause and say, the buyout clause says I can sell you for 5 million rands. Will they let you go? Chances are no. So if you want to leave, then pay us the 5 million rands for your buyout clause. Now, it could be a legal argument between the parties, but I can tell you now, the club stands a good chance of winning because of the buying consent and that they've got a control test that they have. Unless, of course, there's negotiations to early termination of the contract.
Okay, no, Velile, I mean, it sounds like to me that, taking all of this into consideration that, Bidvest Wits tried to exit this situation, or the management thereof anyway, tried to exit the situation looking and sounding like things were taken care of, and, not really kind of being honest in terms of how this might pan out for all the players. They made assurances in a sense that weren't theirs to make.
Yeah, look, I think I've always known that something like this is coming up, especially when there has to be this type of movement that has to happen. And we were expecting. We've seen it in the past with some clubs, even though with other clubs it was not really a big issue. But also, I think from the way TTM is handling it, I think it's something that can be handled better than they are doing currently, which is why I don't want to speculate, because it would have been better if they were on this platform so that we can be asking them these questions. But maybe just to close from my side on this topic, so what's the next step now, Mr. Mitchell?
Look, again, as I said earlier, our clients' cases are in the hands of the lawyer who's acting on their behalf now. So I that's going to happen, and we leave it to the legal people. I think what I find disappointing, for me to wrap up, and I'm saying this in a general term and not specifically about a case, what I find very disappointing is the fact that you've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players, senior players earning good money. You can't afford them. So you just say it's fine, you can go. But listen, we're going to exploit these youngsters. That's what I'm trying to say. Or we're going to try. That's what I'm trying to say. And that's what I find very disappointing. Players entered into agreements with Bidvest Bits even in June. New contracts, even in June. I can tell you, Velile, because you were there. You know this. Boutli Makwanazi had a lot of interest after the AFCON from overseas. Okay? We were told, but in a nice way, we were told he wasn't for sale. They didn't want to lose him. We accepted it. Boutli said it's fine. I'm happy to stay. I've been at the club a long time and I really enjoy it here. We had a new 3-year deal on the table, even 2 weeks before the club was sold. We didn't even know. And then boom, the club is sold. So all I'm saying is that it's very disappointing when them things happen, and then it's very disappointing when what's agreed by when we say the management at Bidvest. No, not the management. It's the board. The board of Bidvest were the ones talking to the players. So the management, Jonathan, etc. Very good with the players and always have been. Hence why they have the big respect from the players. But the top, the decision maker right at the top, or the decision makers of the board at the top, okay, gave assurances to every player that things would be done correctly. Now, all I'm saying is it isn't getting done correctly right now, and what's happening is not correct. It will be a legal battle, fine, but it's very, very sad.
Robin Human is one of your players, right?
He is.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wanted to note that one.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
I'm actually the captain, eh?
Sorry?
I'm actually the captain.
Yes, correct.
Yes.
There we go. Okay, on that note, thank you very much to Paul Mitchell, Mandla Tshabalala for your expertise this evening. Really appreciate you joining us on.
I think it comes up before. I think before Bramandla goes, we just have some free kick questions for him. And a free kick, you put it where we come from. You put it and then you take the free kick. Just a quick one on the issue of Kaizer Chiefs. They appeared at CAS for their appeal last week. I know that some people thought it was going to be an immediate thing in terms of the outcome. And maybe if in the nature of the case they have, how would you say? Would you say they've got a strong case in this appeal? How do you think things will go for them in this case against Fossa Juniors and the FIFA?
Before I proceed, can I greet my fellow brother, Brawili? Brawili!
He's on mute.
It's good to see you, brother.
Waiting to have a chance.
Gee, it's been a long time. You well?
It's been a long time. I'm well, I've survived. See, even now, I'm taking precautions.
I'm at home. I don't need it. No, it's good to see you, really. How are you, my brother?
Good to see you. Good to see you, Velile. Velile, coming back to your question, I've always maintained that for FIFA to arrive at the decision that they arrived at, it's not something light. There's a lot of evidence that was presented before FIFA. And I doubt if Chiefs did enough to prove that the player where he came from was an amateur. Because remember, it's a question of amateur and professional, because the club in Madagascar said he has an employment contract. Remember, the league can be amateur. I mean, let me give you an example of ABC Motsepe. It's an amateur league, but you know that there are professional players. Because the rules of FIFA says, as long as there's a professional contract, the status changes. You're no longer an amateur, you become a professional. by virtue of you receiving a monthly salary every month. But if I give you a stipend for your traveling and soccer boots, then there's no contract of employment. So I'm convinced, I was not part of the case, but I'm convinced that the club in Madagascar has presented sufficient evidence to prove that the player was a professional player. And one of the things that proves that he was a professional player is a contract of employment. Now, I don't know what Chiefs is relying on to say the player was actually not a professional, but was an amateur. Remember, the club also had a support from the league and from the association to say this player is a professional player. So, my opinion, it's very unlikely that CAS will change the decision of FIFA, but depends again on what evidence will Chiefs present to CAS.
Yeah, no, very interesting, because the players rep happens to be the same man who is also here again. Jack of all trades.
I was going to leave, and then when Mr. Tshabalala started talking, I said, "No, let me hang around here because he won't know that I've just given evidence at CAS." Okay.
Also, so you are also an interested party, Paul, in this case.
Yeah, for sure. But look, I can't say too much on the case because it's pending. What I will say, and this is, I'm not necessarily directing this at the Dax case. Okay. The question between amateur and professional, Mr. Tshabalala is quite correct on that in terms of how we describe.
We're agreeing on something.
No, we do agree. It's just interpretation.
It's only a joke. It's only a joke, Paul.
Yeah, we do. But what I'm saying is, quite correctly, there's a FIFA lay down the difference between amateur and professional. Okay. However, when you have an issue on a contract of a player, okay. Am I still there?
Yes.
No.
Okay. Sorry. When you have an issue on a contract of a player, it's quite simple. International transfers, transfer management system.
Yes.
Okay. So the buying club or the receiving club says on the platform, where FIFA's on the platform, it would be the South African Football Association and let's say the Bulgarian Association, because he's coming from Bulgaria, and FIFA, and everybody's on the platform. Now, the fundamental process that happens is that the receiving club says, this is the player, we're offering him a contract of employment, here is that contract of employment, and then 99.9% of the time, the Bulgarian club in this case would say, yeah, no problem, here's our permission to clear, and the Bulgarian FA, along with the SAFA FA, do what they need to do, and an ITC is granted. Okay. Now, if there's a dispute, there's a mechanism for that dispute to be on that platform. So it will be, here's this contract of employment, and the other side says, hey guys, we've got an issue with this. Okay, FIFA say, what's the issue? He's got a contract. Okay, so where's the contract? So then normally, the normal procedure, and this is why FIFA put it in place, the professional contract is loaded onto that TMS system so that FIFA, the two associations, and everybody can see. Then there shouldn't be an argument unless the player says, Ibo, this is not my contract, right? Now, if that contract is not loaded, what do FIFA do? And the other party says, well, we got a contract. Where is it then? And it's not loaded. So then FIFA look at the case and make a decision and clear the player. You know? So without speaking specifically about the specific case, what I'm saying is TMS has to be followed to the letter T. If it's not followed to the letter T, then you're going to get cases where FIFA will clear players. And it won't be the first time that FIFA will clear a player, only for FIFA at a later date to make a ruling. But why do we have these platforms? Why do we have these systems in place if they're not going to be followed? And then
I hear you.
A contract turns up 9 months later. That's interesting. And I can say this without talking about the specific case. One of the things that I have made clear to FIFA in my communication with them is that, in my opinion, of 11 years working in Africa, players are not protected. And I'll tell you why. When a player signs a contract with a club, the player gets a copy, the club get a copy, and there's supposed to be a copy lodged, in our case with the PSL, but in most cases with the association. Okay? Velile, you've been around Africa and you've covered many of these cases. You cannot tell me there's not corruption within certain countries and certain associations in cahoots with clubs. So what I've said to FIFA is that the current system does not protect players, because when a player signs a contract, all parties, the club, the associations, and even FIFA should know and have copies and have transparency that, yes, that player signed that contract at this time, and here's the evidence. So that 4 years down the line, or 3 years down the line, when there's an issue, people can bring up that evidence, backtrack and say, yep, here it all is. At the moment, we can't do that. And if you speak to Senzo in Tanzania, ex-Platinum Stars, ex-South African football, he'll also give you 3 examples of similar cases where players have supposedly had contracts and they haven't had contracts. Their contracts had expired, but yet they weren't protected. And they had to go down a real big chain of legal expense to try and get what's rightfully theirs. And in the end, they end up winning. But it's a big problem. And it's a big problem that both FIFA and CAF need to look at immediately, is that we need to protect players more than we're doing, because at the moment, the current system, in my opinion, does not protect players.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. No, there's a lot of meat to munch on this bone, and I think we'll probably tie it up when we have more clarity as to what's happening with TTM, and obviously more clarity as how to this Chiefs case transpires in the end. Gentlemen, Paul, Mandla, really on a football podcast, hopefully was discussed tonight. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome one William Shongwe, who joins us now on the Front Runner Football podcast to speak all things Kaizer Chiefs, as the big news, of course, today is the fact that we have Gavin Hunt being appointed as the new head coach of Kaizer Chiefs. And Brawili, you know the man well. You've worked with him. So in terms of the Kosi Nation and what they can expect from Gavin Hunt as their head coach, what are they getting in this winner of a coach? Let's start there, which is very important with Kaizer Chiefs having come so close at the end of this last season. Welcome.
Sorry, Kamza. Before he can start, Brawili.
Hey, Velis. I'm strong in yourself, my brother. Long time.
I'm strong. Is your training gear ready?
Eh?
Is your training gear ready?
What do you know that I don't know?
I'm just asking, because I foresee some reunion here. I'm smelling some reunion.
You know what? This whole day I've been getting some very strange calls from people I don't know, asking very strange questions that I cannot answer because I'm in the dark, and I just want to put it straight to you right now, even before you go on. don't even go there because I'll not tell you anything. I don't know anything. Up until somebody comes to me.
It's not a question. It's not a question. I only have one thing to say. Home is always home for you, right?
It has always been home. That I think it's safe to say. It has always been home.
You've answered me.
You're killing me. Wow. Hey, look, we don't know where it's going, but hey, Kamza, can we get on with it?
Yeah. Answer Kamza. I'm done.
Okay.
Really, yes, sir. So Gavin Hunt, favorite from everybody to take over this job. And, in terms of sentiment, it's mixed. Some people think, he's a one-dimensional coach. Some people will look at footage and say he can get a team to play. Where do you sit? Which camp? And because you know him so well, what insights do you have?
Kamza, thanks very much for the opportunity to come into this platform. And I'm actually really excited about, I was very excited to be able to pounce onto this news about the finality of the agreement of Gavin Hunt. I mean, it's been pending for the longest. But first of all, before I even answer that, I think it's important to maybe applaud Chiefs for having been that quick in making the decision. Remember, from the past, Chiefs have had to take a long time to make an announcement, making it very difficult for the players who obviously are not too certain about what's going to happen to them when the new coach comes, and also which in a way does upset the preparation of the team. You remember the time, or the season that Solinas was hired. Only 2 weeks before the season started, he arrives. And I can imagine what kind of preseason would he have done with the team, and how much of his philosophy would the players have understood, and which basically set the season into a very, very, very disorganized one for Kaizer Chiefs, which eventually we saw. They came out with nothing eventually. But very happy for Gavin Hunt. I feel it was overdue. That's my thinking. I mean, Gavin Hunt has achieved just about everything there is, except for two, coaching one of the two Soweto Giants, and of course, getting into the national team. I think if there's anything that he hasn't achieved, it's those two. But at least now with the signing with Kaizer Chiefs, that puts him in a position where he's will be able to have the chance to coach one of the big sides. But these styles and approach to the game, you know what? Kaizer Chiefs at this stage. Are you with me, Kamza?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Yes.
Loud and clear, sir.
Thank you.
Keep going.
Kaizer Chiefs.
I don't want to interrupt your flow.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Kaizer Chiefs at this stage, I don't think it's about playing style or about what Gavin does. Kaizer Chiefs needs desperately to win a cup. And if there's one thing Gavin can guarantee you, is that he's going to win them something within this very season. So you need to bring back the pride into the Naturena village. That is first and foremost for Kaizer Chiefs. They need to get back to winning ways. I'm not just winning games, but winning silverware. And that obviously is the biggest challenge that the team is going through. They've played the best football in some season, in the past, say, 4 seasons at some stage with Steve Komphela, and they came out with nothing. And the German came, Middendorp, and obviously he's a little bit structured and a little bit rigid in his approach, and they got nothing. And right now, put aside all the pride about style. Style for what? What is this business all about? What's the business of football all about? It's about winning games. That is what companies and sponsors are looking for. This is what the fans need to celebrate. The pride of being able to win a championship. And Gavin is going to make sure that at least one of these cups that are obviously are available, he's going to make sure that he wins 1 or 2 of them. So right now, I think this is the best choice that Kaizer Chiefs have made. Let's put aside the style and everything.
Okay, I mean, I hear all of that, and you touched on his philosophy. How would you encapsulate his philosophy?
You were breaking a little bit. I didn't quite get that one.
Okay, I was saying, how would you personify his philosophy? How would you describe Gavin Hunt's philosophy?
Okay, you see, that's the other area that I feel maybe Gavin Hunt is misunderstood. Just because he played for Hellenic, which is a hard-running team, and obviously he's a coach at that stage. Bajipain, may his soul rest in peace. He was more of an Englishman. Their type of football was more direct, more the English way of playing. Down the line, get a cross in, and get the big players to head. But Gavin has been long enough. Gavin, by the way, when he left Cape Town, he joined Black Leopards, who didn't have any of those players that will give you the type of philosophy that people talk about, whereby he's more direct. He had a team of players that played the most beautiful football in their first season in the PSL and ended up in the top 8, beating the likes of Kaizer Chiefs in the process, playing attractive football, attacking football. So now, remember, it's not so much about the philosophy of the coach. It's about the players that you have on board that determines what type of game are you going to play. So a coach has very little as far as an influence of how the team is going to play. It's the players. You as a coach need to adapt to the quality of the players that you do have. So if you were to look at Gavin Hunt, he obviously played a certain way of playing because of the players that he had then. But if Gavin Hunt, if he had Messi in his team, I'm sure he'll play the tiki-taka type of football. And which is, for me, a coach can only adapt with what he has on the play. By the way, I was talking earlier about him joining. The point I'm trying to make will come a little bit later. Let me just maybe give you the chance to go on. I think I've kind of explained the philosophy. The philosophy is he plays what he calls from the front. He plays from the front, meaning that he doesn't allow too much play in defense. That means he's going to try and shift the game to start the passing game a little bit higher in the field. It's not direct. It's like he obviously that step guides him from a situation where ball position is lost in his own half, whereby the players don't recover enough. He had that situation, by the way, 2 seasons ago when he introduced the likes of Klassen and Skilo, the players that likes to maybe build from. In fact, the team was not quite adaptable to playing that, and they considered their highest goals. In fact, they were threatened at some stage to being relegated. That is Bidvest, which is the style that they adopted. Those players weren't quite ready to play from the back, and they were punished, and they considered the highest possible goal scored.
Wow, that is some incredible insight there in terms of, obviously, if he strays away from what he knows best, how it can sometimes work against him. In terms of the personnel that he has, hoping things are equal and maybe they get this whole cast situation and are able to demark they have, what do they need?
I would say, I'll put it to you right now, that if there was one challenge that he will have is being able to get to revitalize this players that he has right now. Because let's talk about his the type of football beside the philosophy, but there's other aspects of the game in between the philosophy. You can play the straight or direct type of football where you want the ball down the line and so on, but you still needs a certain intensity into your game, whereby you play. Some players, are happy to sit and absorb the pressure, and they play transitional football, whereby only when they win the possession back do they go forward. But now that means a team like that is not going to apply high pressure. But with Gavin, he mixes it both depending on certain instances of the game, whereby he can sit back when the opposition has the ball, but when he is on the attack, he plays high pressure so that when he loses the ball in the higher areas of the field, he's able to pressure and be able to win the ball. Gavin's Hunt's team, they create the most chances. The only one snag that I've seen in just about all the teams that he's coached is that he's not scoring enough if you were to compare the chances that he creates. And if it's too direct, why would you be able to create so many chances? If it's not entertaining, it's not creative. Remember, beside the play and the passing game in the middle of the play, it's the goal actions that really makes a game to be exciting. And all of Gavin's team, if you look at how he plays, there's lots more goal actions. There's the goalkeepers and the defenders from the opposition are always under so much pressure. And that is what fans need. That is what excites the fans when they're in the stadium or even sitting at home watching the game on TV. And so for me, I'm telling you, Gavin will be able, the only challenge that he has is, will these players adapt to his system? Will they be able to maintain high pressure football, the high intensity type of football that he plays? And that for me, if only he was given the chance to maybe introduce a few players of his own or the players that can play that. But I think arriving there, you'll be able to pick and choose who's more likely to bring on board to make sure that it happens within the squad that is got.
Okay. Before we let you go, bro, Willie Stavech has a question also and his opinion on the subjects.
Yeah, Brawi, firstly, he comes at a time when there's the issue of the transfer ban. So I was very much interested in looking at the two scenarios, because I understand that the club has not been sleeping in this window, even though they cannot sign or register players, but they're not sleeping. And judging by what I'm getting is, at least wherever they are looking, it's also where he's also comfortable at as well. But in the event that the ban, the appeal of the ban is not successful, do you see him turning things around with the current squad?
It's not going to be easy. And but what the one thing that he has got is we're going to give credit where it's due. If you look at what Atazwan has been able to do in that development, if you look at some of the players that got promoted, even in this last season under Mnyandu, very exciting players. And that for me already has got a springboard if he needs to really shake up the current scenario with these new youngsters that were introduced last season under Mnyandu. And I think they'll give him some form of stability. And with this simple system that Gavin does play, he doesn't complicate the game too much, which is, I think, what helps even ordinary players to be able to play for him, because it's not too complicated. Yes, a little bit direct, but he will have a few players in certain positions that can transform the game to where he wants it. Let's go back to the way that he played at SuperSport. They weren't the most exciting team in as far as their build-up is concerned. But if you look at Dane Clay in that wing play, if you look at Pelembe on the other side, on the right-hand side of the wing, suddenly, with the ball a little bit high in the field, there's excitement, and that for me is where, as a coach, a good coach targets certain areas to where he can make his game happen, even when the other areas maybe are not up to scratch. So for what he's been able to do with very little resources, I think with those youngsters coming from the development, that's why I say credit must be given to Atazwane for the great work that he's been able to do over the years to continue to produce youngsters that are quick to fit into the first team structures.
Yeah, in fact, I always say, I've been saying this season, and one time I was even saying it to himself that with the squad you had no business challenging for the league title. I don't know why you are here challenging for the league title, but because you are the coach that you are, you managed to be competitive with this team. And bear in mind, this was a team which was also in the group stages of the CAF Confed, and he arrives at a Kaizer Chiefs team which has never been to the group stages of a CAF Champions League or even CAF Confed. And now he'll be back in the CAF Champions League.
That obviously is the other challenge. I'm glad that you're already looking so far ahead, because it's not just the kickoff of the season. Suddenly, in about 3-4 games time, the CAF competitions are going to kick in. And if the squad is limited as it is right now, and having to basically juggle this kind of so many balls at the same time for a team that has not been that space.
Really, we lost your mic.
I'm just hoping that there should be enough to be able to, because for who he is able to focus and zoom on to a period of games in as far as what he can do in this period. And that is how basically he's going to play it, in the hope that in the meantime, management are going to be trying hard to deal with the other issue of the suspension from signing players from CAF. So we hope that can come in a little bit quicker so that Gavin Hunt can have all that he needs to achieve the ambition that he has.
Yeah, I think that's definitely another whole topic when we actually find out how that pans out, because then we'll know the implications of his situation as a coach. But obviously the Kosi Nation are hoping that it doesn't stand and that he can at least dip into the market and try to give it a good run, because it's there for everyone to see, bro, Willie. The team is capable. I mean, yes, they lost out on the last day, but you add some quality in certain areas and they can go for it again. And I guess you'd want that momentum because the fear is if that's sanction comes into place, it might be a while until Chiefs can compete at that level, even though you say Gavin Hunt can win them a cup maybe as consolation.
It's a pity because should the band stands, and I think Chiefs will be robbed of a moment by which they could easily resurrect their status to where they used to be under Gavin Hunt. But he has accepted the job regardless. If there's one thing that I used to chat about him even before the issue came to this, because I knew at some stage this will come. And he was saying, if you were to get a job at Chiefs, he'll win all the cups. You know, Gavin, I'll win all the cups. I'll win all. So it's a pity because he gets a job at a time where the team structures in as far as the players, the resources are ailing a bit. But you know what? This is what it is. This is what coaches are hired to do. They are hired to make the impact. They're psychologists. That's why they get paid. They get paid the big monies. I'm sure in the back of his mind, before he accepted, before he put pen to paper, he must have thought about all the pros and cons that he's more likely to face. And I'm sure he's got a scoop somewhere whereby he knows this is how he's going to maneuver. And we can only hope that things obviously do work out for him, because I feel like Chiefs, this is the one time that we're going to see the resurrection of the old Chiefs, where they'll sweep the board. I mean, in our time, winning cup was never even a worry that are we going to win a cup. It was a question of how many cups are we going to win. So I think with this man's return or arrival at the Naturena village, wow, the Coast Nation, we're going to be happy people again.
Well, yes, you know what, in the spirit of the lovely game, I certainly hope so, because it will definitely make the race and the title and all the cups a lot more interesting if we have the likes of Kaizer Chiefs being a growing concern and one that can actually affect the outcome of all these various cups and league situations. Thank you so much, Bro Willie. It's always great speaking to you. Like I say, we're making a commitment now to speak once again once we know what's happening as far as that scenario is concerned, and maybe we start seeing who joins him as far as his technical team, and if whether he'll be able to work with some of the people that he's found at the club. We'll look into that as well. So thank you so much for your thoughts and impressions. Stavej, thank you to you too, sir, for coming through and also bringing through the expertise of Mandla Tshabalala to speak with us this evening. Yeah, him and Paul clearly on two different pages, Stavej, but one of them has to be wrong. One of them is going to be wrong.
Yeah, no, time will tell. Time will tell. The good thing about these things is that in football, they all have an expiry date, you know? Yeah. There's always that day where the outcome is coming. Just like we will see even next week about Brawley.
T-minus. T minus. The streets want to know, any ideas as to who's going to be the new sponsor of the league?
We spoke about that in as soon as the sponsor was gone. We spoke about that. The address is in Randburg.
Okay, cool. You know the same thing I know.
Willie
Okay.
again.
Willie again.
Who very knows too much. Whereas when you sometimes it's dangerous. You know too much. Be careful.
No. It's that we try to manage information. You know, it's that sometimes football fans are impatient. They try to drive you to say things because there's this pressure of social media now. But what is important is
Speaking of which, the breaking news: TTM have just released Piso Tlanti and Tabang Munar.
Aha.
Breaking news.
And where is Tlanti going?
Possibly in Pretoria somewhere.
Oh.
Well, I think
somewhere in the yellowish nation.
I will give you 0 out of 5 because you know the address, but you don't want to share it.
Well, I'm like
he's
you.
Doing what he's doing. He's managing the information. He's managing.
Yes. And one south maybe. Following his Mqeqeshi.
Hey, man. So many permutations. Time will tell, and hopefully we'll reflect on it on the next one. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this evening, Stavej, Brawili, and to you too, who's been watching on YouTube and been joining us via Zoom. We appreciate you all, and hope you had a good, insightful discussion tonight. It was touched on a lot of different things, but I think we had some of the best brains available in the house. So for myself, Kamza, Mbatha, until we do it again soon. And a big shout out to my man behind the scenes, Piwe. We'll catch you in a couple of days' time, a weekend to go, and we'll catch you in the new week. Gents, thank you so much. Keep well. Ciao.
Chop.
Cheers.